After more than half a century of autocratic rule, Syria is negotiating a new future. But is this the rebirth of a nation or just a rebranding? Tahrir al-Sham made overthrowing the Assad regime look easy, but governing the fractured country will be anything but. We'll debate if the interim government is up to the task ahead here on Counterpoints with me, Melinda Nucifora. From an al-Qaeda fighter in Iraq to a terror group leader in Syria and now the newly self-designated president of his country, Ahmed al-Sharaa has a complex past and a very challenging future ahead of him. The HTS was disbanded when al-Sharaa took power in December. He's swapped his fatigues for a suit and tie, but is it realistic to believe that his entire team has discarded their extremist ideologies and embraced unity and justice? Now that would truly be a road to Damascus-style conversion. His administration has a lot to deal with. Israel has started launching attacks from the southern border, negotiations are underway to remove international sanctions, and domestic rifts between minority groups and the government are threatening internal stability.
The Constitution does not represent us as the people of northern Syria, especially for us as Syriac people. We have been marginalized for 53 years. The Constitution has returned with the same approach, including only one perspective, to exclude and marginalize us.
Today on Counterpoints, we'll ask our expert panel, how are the new Syrian government dealing with the country's challenges? If minority groups will accept an Islamic government that pushes Sharia law, and what role, positively or negatively, the international community will play during the transition period. Stay with us. Well, joining me for today's discussion on Syria is Mahmoud Toron, the independent Syrian politician who is working to bridge the differences between the new government and the West, including the lifting of sanctions. Salih Muslim, the co-chair of the PYD, a leading political party in the Autonomous Kurdish region in Syria's northeast. And rounding out our panel, Ambassador James Jeffrey, the former US Special Envoy for countering ISIS in Syria and a former ambassador to Turkey. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us here on Counterpoints. I want to begin today's discussion on the huge in-tray the new government faces. It's believed 9 out of 10 Syrians live in poverty. The country's economy has contracted by a staggering 85%, and it's estimated it will cost up to $400 billion to rebuild the nation. Added to that, an outbreak of violence against the Alawite community has raised concerns about the new administration's ability to coherently govern the fractured country. Ambassador Jeffrey, let me start with you. Is the new administration up to these challenges of rebuilding, repairing and uniting the country?
First, thanks for having me on. It's good to be on with Salih Muslim again. Let me say that the new administration has been much more active generally in the Middle East than we had thought, with all of the talk before the election on pivot to Asia. That's good. The one area where it does not have a clear policy, in particular compared to the Biden administration in the last months, is in Syria, and that is not good. The administration did play a role in encouraging the Syrian Democratic Forces to negotiate a deal with Damascus several weeks ago for eventual inclusion. That's a positive, but the administration still has not taken a final decision on the sanctions, known as the Caesar sanctions, which are imposing really crippling costs on Syria, and it will be impossible for the international community, because it's a larger job than America, to fix Syria without the Caesar sanctions being lifted. There are some conditions being placed on the lifting. These have been passed reportedly to the al-Sham government, but still Washington is being far slower in this administration than the last one was to reach out, and of course far slower than Arab countries or the Europeans have been, and that's not a good thing.
We are absolutely going to come to the US's involvement and of course those sanctions a little bit later on, but let me turn to Mahmoud. What do you think? How have you assessed this new government's first few weeks, months in the role? Can they live up to expectations?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, the government has been in power now for the last 3 months here in Syria, having inherited a large pile of problems and unresolved issues in Syria. Starting with the international relations, they did pretty well in engaging with foreign countries, and so far the communications with Europe and particularly United Kingdom and certain other important countries have been quite good and promising. We've had a lot of bilateral meetings and communications. Some sanctions have been relieved, but the main engagement with the US is still pending to be more advanced and to produce more concrete actions on the ground. On the Arab side, the communications were excellent, and we've seen some quite significant progress being made in the engagement of Arab countries in Syria.
But can
that's
this
mainly
new
on the diplomatic
administration
side,
do
but
it on their own?
internally in Syria, that's the challenge we are facing here in Syria, and which is what I was about to say in on the local front. Inside, we haven't seen much of a development in the situation on the ground. Economically, we are still in collapse, and the living conditions are still extremely complicated. We can see that there is a lack of expertise. There is a lack of engagement from other parts of the Syrian population, not the population, let's say the Syrian professionals, to engage with the government. That has still not yet happened. And this may be a burden into taking the situation in Syria into a more advanced situation where the government needs to provide more concrete solutions to the complicated tasks that face the Syrian nation.
Salih, let me turn it to you then. Leaving the international negotiations and relationships aside, if we just look domestically, this is a government that's going to need to unite the country on its own terms. How have you assessed, what's your verdict on how they face the challenges, the domestic challenges that they're confronting?
Well, first of all, regards to your guests and your team, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. What's going on, I mean, at the new government, of course, I mean, all the Syrian people, they were happy and they were expecting a lot of things. But maybe they are facing the truth now. And the new administration, they are careful about to satisfy outside more than inside. Outside, maybe there were some visits and I mean connection with the European countries, with the United States and the other, and everybody welcomed this new regime and also the Arabic world also. But for the local issues, they didn't solve any issues till now. And on the ground, you can find these massacres going on in the coastal areas and fighting going on with some groups in the north of Syria between those groups encouraged by Turkey and supported by Turkey, and even Turkish attacks. Just last week, one family, all children, they were killed in Kobani, and those problems. And the government is keeping silent without doing anything. So the situation inside is different from the outside policy and diplomatic policy with other countries. I think this regime or this government should care locally more than outside, because the base is to satisfy your people inside. So they have to prevent such massacres and so on. From the other side, we have seen a deal between the SDF, Democratic Syrian Forces, and the new regime. It was okay for eight paragraphs, and in just few days ago, there was another meeting to arrange the committees for implementing this agreement. It's a good step, and we are happy about that, but it's not enough. It's the beginning. From the other side, I mean the steps taken for the constitution and these committees established, and even for the constitution issued, temporary constitution issued, it's all against the people's wish. So we believe the wrong steps from the beginning will result in maybe in some bigger mistakes.
Ambassador Jeffrey, let me ask you then, we just heard from Salih saying wrong steps at the beginning can lead to future mistakes. This transition period is 5 years, and that came as a surprise to some observers. Do you see that as perhaps a wrong step from the beginning?
Well, first of all, it's for the Syrian people, and we have two of them here today, to decide whether these are wrong steps or not. I've certainly been involved in the UN Resolution 2254 process for Syria, which looked at a way to resolve the internal disputes with a constitutional process, eventually elections, and that was stretched over several years. I also know that in my involvement in Iraq from 2004 to 2005, we rushed the creation of a new government and a new constitution. The plan we had was ironically also 5 years with an American governing presence authorized by the UN. But the Iraqis wanted to do this faster, so it was done faster, and it was arguably not done well. I think that the key thing will be the preservation of general security, the avoidance of the kind of attacks on minorities that, or I will say, fighting between minorities and the central government that we saw earlier this month in Latakia with the Alawites, and a process with the other minorities, the SDF, we've just heard Salih's views on that, and with the Druze. Those aren't actually a bad program under the circumstances, considering what Syria had been before and what many other countries in the Middle East are going through. So I remain cautiously optimistic.
Mahmoud, what about you? 5 years, is it too long? Is this a wrong step from the beginning? Or is this the government showing that they're being serious? They're taking it slow and steady?
Look, we have to be realistic. The new administration has inherited a very complex situation where they have to deal with several problems at the same time. They have to deal with a country that is just being released from 54 years of systematic sabotage. It's an administration that has to deal with multiple armed factions that already have divided loyalties, and that they need to reunite under one umbrella and form a new armed forces. It's an administration that has to deal with a completely collapsed economy while also facing crippling sanctions that is really limiting their way to maneuver. It's an administration that also has to deal with half of the population being displaced all over the world. So it's not very easy to say that you have to apply the ideal ways of dealing in a situation where you have a transition of power or not a peaceful, but an instability in a country. But in the same time, you have to find the ways that are more applicable to the situation in Syria. A failure to do so is going to result in a much larger problem, which will put these armed factions in a direct conflict between each other. And that's going to develop into really much larger conflict that is going to be much more difficult to control. The situation in Syria, why we are here right now, is the result of 14 years of an unresolved conflict. Had the situation been dealt with much better in the beginning, we surely wouldn't have been in this situation, and probably we wouldn't have been in the faces now, and with the people, being in charge of the country. Saying that it's the wrong beginning, if you want to take it ideally, probably yes. But looking at the situation we have on the ground, I think we have made much better progress than anticipated, at least. Obviously, we don't have to see attacks neither against minorities nor against any other sect of the Syrian people, but we do not see evidence of mass acts of violence, targeting neither minorities nor any other sects, except the incidents that happened in the coastal area, which have been dealt with and which is actually pending an investigation. And that gives slightly a message of hope that probably the days to come would show better results and better engagement from the government.
Okay, we're going to move on to minorities in just 1 minute, but Salih, I just want to ask you just briefly, one of the key roles that this new government needs to play is providing security for its population. Has the government been able to provide a sense of security and stability for civilians? They've been in the power for 3 months now. Should they have been able to if they haven't?
Well, I think if you are looking for the security of the people and for the society of Syrians and the minorities and so, you have to be sincere about consulting those people, which they are meant by this, all the actions you do. And you have to choose the right tools to do that. I mean, you cannot do it with Salafist or jihadist ideas, which the groups are taking. I mean, we have a lot of those foreigners coming from Tajikistan, from anywhere else, and they have massacred, I mean, what's going on in the coastal areas mainly. So you cannot do security with those people. You have to choose the Syrians, to choose the right people to do it, and to do it in consultant with these people, which they are subject to this means you are trying to do. And I think all the Syrians, I mean, all the components of Syria, they are ready to do it, and all of them, they were happy about getting off from the old regime. But of course, they are looking for more good conditions and stabilize Syria, and so they're looking for that. But you cannot do it with those tools already. They are inactive, I mean. So they have to change it. And even the committees established for doing many things, those committees, they were one color, not more than that. I mean, same idea, the same people, they cannot do anything. I think, I mean, or at least are not acceptable by the Syrian people. So this is the case, I think.
All right, let's look to the task of unifying the country. Syria is not an easy place to govern. The civil war over the last 14 years has seen violence along sectarian lines. The new Syrian administration will be an Islamic government, but religious and ethnic minorities make up about 30% of the population. And there are some, including the Druze in the south and the Kurds in the northeast, who are reluctant to relinquish control of their regions to a centralised government. So, Mahmoud, do you think Syria can ever be governed as a unified entity, or Could we see a future where the country is divided along ethnic or religious lines?
Well, we have to go back to a bit in history in Syria. The only period where we saw a massive exodus of the minorities and non-minorities was during the 54 years of the Assad regime reign. Before that, we had a very nice and peaceful way of a unity in Syria, where we did not really witness any sectarian, neither violence nor divisions in Syria. It is only the last 54 years where we saw actions being taken against minorities by the Assad regime and by the Assad family regime. I'm not going to say the Assad minority regime, because it may not be considered as such. Assad regime was a family-targeted era that is just targeting any part of the Syrian people that opposes his regime.
The issue
now that is over.
Though, is that
today
that's been
it's a
more
new
than
beginning
50
for
years
Syria
now, and you've got a whole new generation or generations of people who perhaps have been radicalized by what they saw during the Assad regime. So can this new administration unify them, or are they going to break further apart?
I believe they have no choice but to unify them, because breaking apart is not a solution for the country. It's not a solution for the needs of the people. Today, being in Damascus gives you the impression of what people are expecting for the country. You have to bear in mind that the most part of the Syrian population is not a radical, is not radicalized, and is not really a big fan of extremism. On the contrary, they are more into a different culture of religion, and the government understands this nature very well. We did witness some kind of a leaning towards the Syrian society when the current interim president has visited certain mosques in the city where they are completely ideologically different from the background where they came from during the last 10 years. So unifying the country is not an option that we have, but it's just a direction where we need to head towards. And the government so far has shown signs of being directed into this direction. First, we had the SDF agreement, which was signed with Mr. Mazloum Abdi. Second, we had a limited participation of minorities in the National Dialogue Conference, in the Constitutional Committee discussions, and right now we're just about to focus on the government. So we don't see evidence of the government being radicalizing the future of the political life in Syria, rather than giving the opportunity to several factions to participate in the political process.
Salih, you represent the Kurdish region. You've said in an earlier answer that you don't think the government has done anything to solve any of the issues so far. Do you disagree with Mahmoud then, that the government is making progress and that its only option is to unify?
Well, what I said, I mean, all the people are ready for unification and to work together and to be helpful for this new regime. But the problem is in the regime itself, because as I said, I mean, those tools, I mean, for example, those, I mean, doing these massacres in the coastal areas, maybe I don't know if they are part of the regime or not. So they have to clarify themselves with tool. I don't think somebody came from Afghanistan or from Uzbekistan to Syria is fighting for the democracy of democratizing Syria. No. So he is different image. So I think the government itself should be clear for what they are doing. And even this committees established, you can see now maybe some of them are from different areas. One is Jordanian and the other is Turkish origin and so. And all the government, I mean, without any all of them, they have a Turkish passport. They are still waiting the instructions from Turkey. So you cannot build your country in this side. So you have to be free, and you should refer to the Syrian people and to look for their demand, to take steps for that, more than to satisfy outside Syria, because locally you should satisfy your people. This is, I think, the important one.
So as things stand at the moment, do you think the Kurdish ethnic group want to remain as part of Syria, or do you think they've been seeing what's happening and there are some sections of the Kurdish community who don't want to be a part of this?
Well, we said from the beginning, and I am repeating again for you to know, we are the real partners of Syria for everything, for establishment, for putting the institutions, and for managing, for arrangement, economically, social. We are part of Syria, but we would like to be a real shared partners of this country. So the problem is not from our side, and we are trying to do, maybe in near future, in just few days, maybe this the discussions for that will start. With the new regime. And we are ready for that. I think all the Kurdish area, there is no any Kurdish movement looked for independent or for dividing Syria or no. And maybe you can recognize what we are calling for in our system, which is established in northeast of Syria. We are living together with the Arabs, the Syriacs, maybe Turkmens, and all the minorities. With all these divisions, we are living together. So there is diversities all together is a good thing. Accepting each other, changing the ideas and mentality are the same for unification, and it's valid for all of Syria. What we are calling for.
Ambassador Jeffrey, let me ask you, as an observer, as someone who has had a long history in the region, you also mentioned the reconstruction of Iraq. From the outside, looking in, we heard Salih there saying the problem's not coming from the Kurdish side. They want to be a coherent part and a valued part of this new administration. Are you seeing enough being done by the al-Sham government to not just say that they're going to include ethnic and religious minorities, but actually doing it?
They could do more. There's a difference between, and we saw this in Iraq, there's a difference between token presence of minorities and various groups and actual participation in real governance. The problem is you have the best example of all the various ethnic and religious groups actually participating in government in the Middle East is Lebanon, and that's a really bad example for everyone on misgovernment and the destruction of a state. So you've got to be very, very careful what you're doing. All in all, I am impressed with certainly al-Sham himself in his outreach to the various groups. What is not surprising, what was surprising to me is not the initial battles around Latakia between Alawite elements and the central government, but rather when that did occur, we didn't see a repeat. We didn't see the government pouring in more troops. We didn't see continued violence, but rather an effort to try to calm that down. That's the kind of practical thing we need. The country will survive and eventually prosper under two conditions. One is that the various fractions within the country work to one or another degree together, realizing that if they're divided, they will be exploited by outside forces. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is the international community has to speak with one voice. Right now, that's actually happening pretty much with two exceptions. One, Washington has almost no voice, and a second, Israel is taking a very negative position towards this regime, and that's very problematic because the Israelis have a lot of influence in Washington. Actually, there's a third country, Iran. Iran is trying to get back in. That is a recipe for another 14 years of division and violence and displacement. And it's very, very important that Iran stay out.
Mahmoud, let me turn it to you. We heard from Ambassador Jeffrey there saying there's a big difference between a token presence and real participation. What do you believe you've been seeing at the moment? When you consider that in this constitutional declaration, the new president of the country must be Muslim, how does that make minorities feel included and valued?
The constitutional declaration has been issued in unusual circumstances where it's difficult to apply ideal ways of either experts discussing the details of the declaration or probably even discussing the constitution in general. We in Syria, we are sort of a race against the time. You need to stabilize the country and you need to stabilize the arms in this country, but you also need to restart the country from scratch. So neither the president nor any other governing body have the luxury of spending enough time talking to everyone and everybody, including minorities, including any other sect, while dismissing the dangers that we have in Syria. For example, the issue of foreign fighters has always been raised here in Syria and in the media. But this is a real threat to the security that we have. It's a challenge that the administration has to deal with because, in a way, they can't go out and say that they have to leave the country because it's not going to happen that easily. But in another way, everybody understands that this may pose a threat, particularly to the minorities in Syria. Mm-hmm. Back on the streets over here, we do not see any evidence of internal clashes or internal problems that may arise from the radical part of, you can call it the fighters or the security apparel, and the various parts of the Syrian population. So what the president really has to do over here is try to balance the differences that may occur as a result of minorities, not threats, but let me say concerns, international pressure to guarantee minorities' safety, and the situation on the ground. So far, the discussions have been fruitful between all parts of the Syrian mosaic. The president has sent committees to discuss not only with Christians but also with the Kurds and the Druze in Suwaida. And so far, it's been fruitful, promising, but more needs to be done from the president, from the administration, and from anyone related to the security and the military rebuilding structure and strategy of the country.
Right. We've been talking a lot domestically. Let's broaden our focus internationally, because there have always been foreign actors playing political chess in Syria, and the new government is dealing with Turkish forces present in the north, Israeli tanks in the south, EU and US sanctions still biting economically, and Russia allegedly pushing for internal strife to weaken the new administration. So Ambassador Jeffrey, let me ask you, to what extent can Syrians set their own path and decide their own future, or do they need international influence and a strong guiding hand from a country like America?
From my own experience working on Syria, a united policy by the international community involving everybody, probably that would include Russia, which I think does support a unified Syria, with the exception of Iran, which is a malignant force in the region. Pursuing almost any policy towards Syria as a whole, the new government reconstruction, is better than 3 or 4 sets of policies by 3 or 4 outside actors that are colliding with each other and producing chaos and violence. So therefore, my biggest concern is the division, not so much Israel. Israel has its tanks in the south and is coordinating with the Druze, but Israel's real impact on Syria, given the other things Israel is doing, is relatively limited. The main outside actor that's so important is the United States, because the United States is taking a different position than Turkey, than the Europeans, than the UN, and then the Arab states. This, and probably Russia as well, which is dealing with the Damascus government. This, to me, is very concerning. The United States does have some reasonable demands of Damascus in return for lifting the sanctions, but my sense is, behind the scenes in Washington, there is a real reluctance to engage in Syria, given other things, given Israeli pressure to have a very different approach, and given the problems that we've discussed today.
Is that going to be a problem for Syria? Because if I read some comments you've made in the past, you said, if we let Syrians decide, it's going to look like Syria before, only without Assad, or like Libya. So do you think Syria can do it alone if America is distracted elsewhere?
America is the most important outside country. First of all, it's hard to get a unified international position without the United States playing a major, if not leading role. Secondly, the U.S. has a major military presence, not just in the Northeast, which we all know about, working with the SDF against the Islamic State, but also in the South at al-Sham. And the United States has the Caesar sanctions. These are the 2 biggest impediments to a unified, economically functioning Syria. And therefore, the United States holds the key, and the inability to fathom what Washington is really thinking, but the reality that whatever it's thinking, it's put it in a different place than the Europeans and the Arabs in Turkey, is troubling.
Mahmoud, what do you think about that? The US holds the keys, as Ambassador Jeffrey said. Do you think that if left to their own devices, if left to Syria to decide, it will look like Syria before without Assad, if you don't have US influence?
Yes, I do agree with the US holding the main keys. But like you said, describing the situation as it is, where you have 4 different armies or foreign presence in Syria, east, west, north, and south. Each one has its own. Each one has its own forces. Each one has its own army and structure, and sometimes they might be even colliding with each other. Like today, Russia and the United States are not in very good terms. Turkey and Israel aren't also in very good terms. So preserving the independent Syrian decision making while having foreign forces on the ground is a very complex situation. Probably we haven't seen that much in other similar cases. Mm-hmm. But in Syria today, we look for a better future that is completely different from what Assad has taken us. Assad has mainly aligned with Russia a lot in the past, and Russia has its own reason to align with Assad as well. As ordinary Syrian citizens, we don't feel we should follow that same path. And the only other option that we have is by aligning closer to the West. And the government, quite frankly, has shown signs of that. It did approach the West. It did send signals to the US administration, and it is still welcoming more actions from them. However, on the other side, the sanctions are really limiting the actions of the Syrian government. For instance, in the streets of Damascus. There is a very big shortage of liquidity. We need banknotes, and we need a lot of supply of banknotes to refresh the economy and keep things moving. The only option that we have right now to print money is by approaching Russia, because the West has still refused to print monies due to sanctions. Had we not had this sanction problem, probably it would have deterred the Syrian government from getting closer and closer to Russia, and Russia is using the opportunity to try and get closer to the Syrian government. So it's a bit of a delicate situation where the international community, particularly the West, needs to understand the dynamics that are in the Syrian situation right now, and need to take more concrete steps into engaging more with the Syrian government for the better future of both the Syrian people, the stability in the region, and the relationship with the West with regards to stabilizing Syria and preventing it from going into further rounds of violence and bloodshed.
Salih, let me ask you, we just heard Mahmoud there saying that there's been signs from this new administration that they are trying to align with the West. US holds the key to Syria. Do you agree with that? Can Syria not forge its own path without international intervention?
Well, yes, because the measures for the democracy and the human rights and so on, all available in the Western side, I mean, from the United States, from Europeans, and so I think they could be helpful, very helpful for the Syrian regime and for the Syrian people. And already they are in Syria now, I mean, as international coalition, and so they are involved in Syria. And I think the stability in this area is helping their benefits also. So they are trying to do it. But the problem is, I mean, maybe the American soldiers or the French or the others, maybe they are coming here to help. The other soldiers or maybe armies are coming for occupation, just like Turkish army and maybe even the Iranians and the others. I mean, even Israelis. Their aim is to occupy and to be involved in that. I mean, maybe if the Americans are here, they will leave tomorrow. They don't need to stay to occupy our areas, our lands. The problem is with those forces which they are involved in occupying Syria or to changing Syria according to their benefits. And
so
now
you have concerns about Turkey's involvement. We know that the Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan is liaising with Washington to try and force the YPG to disarm, the same way that we saw the PKK. Do you think Turkish involvement in Syria is an issue?
Well, the PKK is their problem, it's not our problem. And they are trying to connect us with them, which is wrongly. I mean, we don't accept it. And the other thing, I mean, we are not talking about this occupation only. And the Syrian government, the Syrian regime should get out of this influence by Turkey. Just after the signing this agreement, there were the foreign minister and the intelligence services director and the defense minister, they were in Damascus. Why they have been, I mean, in Damascus? They came to maybe to cancel this agreement because they dislike it, because of this Kurdophobia with the Turkish side. So they are trying to arrange the political situation according to the Turkey or to other sides, which is not acceptable by not only me, I mean, all the Syrian people. And even the guilty of these massacres going on in the coastal areas, maybe Turkey is involved in it because all those groups went to do this. They came from Turkish side, from the Turkish border, from those people Turkey used to send them to the other areas for their fighting in Azerbaijan, in Somalia, in Libya, and they have sent them to these areas to massacre the Syrian people.
All right, we have unfortunately run out of time. There is so much more we could discuss, so perhaps we'll have to get you all back on at a later date. Gentlemen, that is all we have time for. Thank you so much for the insightful discussion on Al Arabiya English Counterpoints for today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
You've been watching Counterpoints with me, Melinda Nucifora. Remember to subscribe to Al Arabiya English's YouTube channel and follow us on X and TikTok so you don't miss any of our lively discussions. Thanks for watching.